Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody, wherever you are in the world. Today's webinar is focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, also known as DEI. And we'll be looking at three pillars within this subject today: women empowerment, LGBTQ inclusivity, and accessibility in tourism. The main objective of today's webinar is to foster awareness, education, and best practices to create a more inclusive world and truly empower our members and stakeholders and audiences in the travel industry to be a force for good. So welcome to today's webinar, Supercharging the Travel Industry for a More Inclusive World. I am Alethea, I'm the Head of Member Engagement at PARA, and I am a community builder at heart. I'm very honored today to be your host and moderator for this webinar. Just some housekeeping announcements to make before we get started. Number one, yes, the presentations will be shared with you after the webinar. Number two, please ask any questions that you have in the Q&A function, not the chat. So if you look down below your screen, there are a couple of options for you. One is the Q&A function. This is where all your questions should go. The other one is the chat function. The chat function is for you to introduce yourselves, say hello, have conversations with other webinar attendees, and more. So that's it for the housekeeping announcements, but I do want to take you through today's agenda. So we're going to have three 10-minute presentations from our three speakers. We will be talking about LGBTQ inclusivity in tourism with a presentation from IGLTA. We will be talking about women empowerment in tourism with a presentation from PartnerWise Boardroom. And last but not least, we'll be talking about accessibility in tourism destinations by Korea Tourism Organization. After the three presentations, it will be followed by a robust panel discussion for 35 minutes. This is also where we will be addressing any of your questions, but feel free to keep the questions coming throughout the entire time of the webinar. The total duration of today's webinar is 1 hour, 15 minutes. So without further ado, I do want to welcome LoAnn Halden to turn on her camera, say hello. LoAnn is the VP of Communications at IGLTA, International Gay and Lesbian Travel Association. The IGLTA is the global leader in advancing LGBTQ+ travel, and its mission is to provide information and resources for LGBTQ travelers and expand LGBTQ tourism globally by demonstrating a significant social and economical impact. LoAnn frequently speaks about LGBTQ+ tourism and has participated in travel sessions for consumers and trades on 5 continents. She works tirelessly to contribute to a more inclusive world. LoAnn, over to you.
Thank you, Alethea, for that gorgeous introduction. And thank you to PATA for your long partnership with IGLTA. We're very proud to support you. It is Pride Month, the traditional June Pride Month around the world. So it's a good time for us to be here talking about DEI and specifically LGBTQ+ tourism. As Alethea said, IGLTA is the global leader in advancing LGBTQ+ travel. We are 40 years old. We were founded in 1983. So it's quite an extraordinary feat when you consider that the modern LGBTQ+ rights movement really just began in 1969. So we've been around for a very long time. And I'd like to walk you a little bit through some of the engagements and activities of the association, and also talk a little bit about what inclusive travel means to us at IGLTA. Uh-oh, hang on.
Just go into full screen mode here, presentation mode.
It always works in rehearsal and then it doesn't work in real life. That's exactly it. It's always true.
Yeah, so you can either click, you can either click slideshow or presenters view. No. So this is presenters view. We can see all your notes. So maybe end show, but go back to where you were just now. I think it's under view. Yeah, and enter slideshow mode. Yeah, well, yeah, this works.
Is that better?
Yes, you're in full screen now.
Okay, sorry about that, everyone. So I will try and reset myself a little bit and just say for IGLTA, about our network, we are in 80 countries around the world. And what we really do is bring like-minded businesses and individuals together and help tourism companies to connect and thrive in this important tourism segment, as well as learn about trends and best practices. We're really here to help elevate tourism businesses and align their message to the LGBTQ plus traveler of today. Our work would not be possible without our global partners, so I want to give a shout out to these incredible brands around the world whose year-round support for IGLTA allows us to do the work that we do. But I also have to give significant applause to our members who are across all sectors of the tourism industry, buyers and suppliers. And it's important to remember that beyond the businesses, we are all people and we are individuals. And so when you're looking at LGBTQ plus travel, it's easy to lump it as one big bubble, but it's very, very important when you're approaching the market to understand how diverse it really is once you break it down. We also have a philanthropic IGLTA Foundation, which was founded in 2012, and it has 3 pillars: research, leadership, and education. And it's through the IGLTA Foundation that we've been able to expand and develop more programs to really help with raising awareness about LGBTQ plus tourism within the industry, because education is so important, and that's why we're here today. We have a number of programs that we're working on through the foundation, but we've highlighted a couple of them here for you today. One, the India Initiative, because it sits within the PATA region, and because India is a market that's exploding in tourism. And it's important to remember that within every large tourism market, there is a large and thriving LGBTQ plus population that deserves to be seen and recognized. So we are now working with stakeholders in India to develop more understanding and awareness around LGBTQ plus tourism, both inbound and outbound. We've also developed a transgender advisory group within the IGLTA Foundation because, as I said, it's important to recognize that it's not a one-size-fits-all conversation. I'm capable of talking about the experiences of a lesbian who comes from a place of privilege. And so I have very different benefits and accessibility than a BIPOC queer traveler, or for someone who's gender diverse and living in a country that has anti-LGBTQ plus laws. So by developing this Transgender Advisory Council, we're making sure that more voices are heard within our network and that we can develop resources that are truly inclusive and reflective of our entire community. So what does inclusive tourism mean to IGLTA? I think these bullet points are really key. It's about creating an environment where every traveler feels respected, valued, and supported. It's about fostering understanding and acceptance of all the different beautiful LGBTQ plus identities, and also recognizing the intersectionality within our own community. In the beginning of IGLTA, so much of the conversation was geared toward white gay men. And it's really important now to understand how we intersect with all communities, including the panelists who are here today to talk about accessible tourism and women's empowerment, which is of course also very close to my heart. It's about promoting LGBTQ plus tourism as a desirable market segment. And when I say desirable, I don't mean focusing on the value of it in a dollar sense per se. I'm talking about the loyalty and the resilience of our community and our market. IGLTA did a number of studies post-pandemic of global LGBTQ plus travelers. And in that process, we saw time and again that when compared to the traveling community at large, our travelers were the first ones back out there after the pandemic. They were adventurous, they were resilient, and they were ready to explore safely. And it's a very loyal market. So once you have an understanding of how to be more welcoming of our community of travelers, there are great opportunities there. Inclusive tourism is also about promoting destinations, businesses, and services that are LGBTQ+ welcoming, but also working against discrimination, because there are still nearly 70 countries around the world that criminalize our relationships. Inclusive tourism provides economic and social benefits for destinations. And I think a lot is made about the benefit of catering to LGBTQ+ travelers and the value of them as a market. But I think it's always important to remember that we don't exist in a vacuum, that LGBTQ+ travelers also extends to all of our family, our friends, our allies who are supportive of us. So destinations that are inclusive are actually benefiting across the board through all those different connections that we bring. Inclusive tourism is also about reducing anxiety about what to expect from your travel experience, because at the end of the day, everyone wants to feel safe when they travel. And for LGBTQ+ people, there are added layers to that because of the laws that criminalize our lives, because of discrimination in all forms. And so that's something that tourism businesses can really work to address, to make our travel experience much more enjoyable, because I think everyone deserves to explore the world. And finally, inclusive tourism plays a role in attracting young and creative talent. And I think the most important statistic I can share about this is that there was a recent global survey of 30 countries in the Americas, Europe, and Asia, and it found that 1 in 10 respondents identified as LGBTQ+. However, that rose to 1 in 5 when talking about Gen Z, the generation born after 1997. So when you look at developing tourism in the future, there's a much more open and accepting community coming up. And they're going to be looking to businesses that share their values. So there are several issues that we need to address, some of which we'll talk about in the conversation today and on the panel. The discrimination and prejudice against LGBTQ+ individuals, the lack of awareness and education. I'm so happy for those of you that joined us today, because for many of you, you may be taking the very first step in this conversation. And we applaud that, because every conversation has to start somewhere. There is a limited availability of LGBTQ+ welcoming activities and services in some destinations, and there are real opportunities to work within the local communities to help elevate and support those. There are safety concerns to be addressed, as I mentioned earlier, and also accessibility and mobility challenges for LGBTQ+ travelers with disabilities, because we touch all segments of the traveling population. One of the things that IGLTA is doing to move the needle on IGLTA, or on welcoming tourism, and to really help provide a roadmap to businesses to understand how they can be genuinely welcoming of LGBTQ+ travelers, is our recently launched IGLTA accredited program. And this is not part of IGLTA membership. It's an independent audit. It's rolled out for hotels and accommodations, but it's based on an 8-point criteria assessment around these pillars that you see on the screen of diversity, equity, inclusivity, policy, community, advocacy, transparency, and sensitivity. And what that means is that both in terms of staffing and employment, and in terms of how you approach LGBTQ+ travelers, hotels have this guideline now that they can go through and make sure that they're ticking each of these boxes, and then providing documentation that they're not just saying they're doing it, but they're actually doing the work behind the scenes to make everyone feel welcome. We're very much looking forward to a future of inclusive tourism of greater visibility and acceptance, of more personalization across all segments of queer travel, from family travel to group travel to accessible travel. We're looking toward more sustainable LGBTQ plus travel, developments in technology that address our needs, and continuing education. And for all of those of you who want to experience a deeper dive into this segment, we have our 40th anniversary global convention taking place later this year in San Juan, Puerto Rico. And the dates are actually October 4th through 7th. But if you scan the QR code, you can get all of the details. I'm looking forward to the other presentations. Thank you, Alethea and Pata, for having me. And let's talk more.
Thank you so much, LoAnn. Really looking forward to your replies and the discussion later during the panel discussion. But thank you so much for that presentation. I think several things did jump out at me, so I will be asking you questions later during the panel discussion. Thank you. Next up, we have Salvatore Arico, the CEO of PartnerWise Boardroom. Salvatore, do you want to turn on your camera, join us on stage? So PartnerWise Boardroom are global specialists in finding brand and retail leaders of today and tomorrow. And Mr. Salvatore Arico's career spans 25 years in HR, organizational design, and transformational change within global and retail brands. Salvatore, thank you for being our speaker.
Thank you very much for having me today, and also for the introduction. And actually, yes, I've been working in the travel industry now for about 15 years or even more. Before as a chief people officer for a retailer operating in the travel industry, as I was mentioning, and I'm currently the CEO of PartnerWise Boardroom. PartnerWise Boardroom belongs to PartnerWise Group, which is an executive search firm. So our goal, our objective is to support our clients all over the world on building their organization and providing the best talents according with their needs. I mean, travel sector is definitely a key sector for us. We have been active in the travel sector for many, many years, supporting different players in this industry, from airlines, airports, retailers, hotels, and so on and so forth. But as a company, we also operate in other segments, such as fashion, such as beauty, sports industry, nutrition, which is quite a new sector, which is growing quite a lot. We target basically different layers of the organization, starting from board roles or C-level or senior vice president roles, as well as country leadership or team buildings. Now, as I was mentioning, we operate on a global footprint in EMEA region, as well as Asia Pacific and Americas. There are some key factors that make us proud. One of these is the repeat business, meaning that 90% of the clients that we work with, they keep working with us over the time. This is showing that most probably we are able then to meet their expectations, as well as another important factor is that based on our statistics, 80+% of our candidates placed to our clients are still there in their position or even promoted after 3 years. Now, today we are going to talk about diversity, inclusion, non-dominant groups, how those groups are represented in the business sector, in the travel industry in particular. And on these regards, I also would like to to give you a snapshot of what we as executive search firm are supporting our clients on those dimensions. First of all, we are using some let's say techniques or some approaches that are helping us to support the clients when they are bringing on board professionals. We leverage artificial intelligence solutions. We invested quite a lot in new technologies that are helping us to scout professionals and resources in different platforms across the globe, deep diving specific skills that are required by our clients. Over the time, we have been able also to create diverse talent pools that are obviously considering different dimension of the skills that then are required by our clients. And then we also, in particular in the first phase, when we are going to build the pools of candidates to submit to our clients, we tend to focus specifically on skills and not to disclose, for instance, names or age or any other type of information that is not essential in the recruitment phase, as I said, at least at the very beginning, in order to avoid that any bias can influence the selection of the pool of candidates. We also offer to our candidates some psychometric tests that they can, the clients can ask us to run in order to identify traits of personalities independently from any personal opinion that the line managers might have. So those are a simple set of initiatives that we put in place and are helping us to support our clients on taking, let's say, a neutral decision when they have to bring on board a specific resource. Looking at our data, if we talk about gender, our data on 2022 and 2023, we have placed 55% of female versus 45% of male. So this means that at least this process is somehow balancing the placement of female and male, as well as we also track ethnicity or different other parameters that are showing that we are helping on building really diverse teams. So this is on one end. On the other end, I would like to mention an initiative that we have been launched already since a couple of years. It is very successful. It is called Wise Women. Wise Women is an opportunity, a platform that we as a PartnerWise, we promote, we organize. It's an event that we run 3-4 times a year, where we gather female professionals that are in our network, but not necessarily. Then it is also open to professionals that are not in our networks, bringing them together in order to, on one end, to support their journey on career development within the organization, to give them a place where they can network and they can also share experiences or best practices. And we have seen how powerful it is creating a network of women that share the need to discuss and to see potential initiative or opportunities to grow within their organization. Hundreds of participants have been, as I said, participating to those events. It has been quite well received. And one interesting thing is that Now the concept is somehow evolving, having companies asking us to run similar events within their organization, since they really appreciate the opportunity to bring on board different perspectives. Usually we invite entrepreneurs, chairman or chairwomen, C-levels to as a speaker in during those events. So I will pause it here, and then I'm really looking forward to the panel discussion, deep diving on the diversity and inclusion subject.
Thank you so much, Salvatore, for sharing with us the women empowerment initiatives that you are running at PartnerWise Boardroom. Very excited to hear more later. Thank you. So next up, we have Sujin Hong from Korea Tourism Organization as our next speaker. Sujin joined, since Sujin has joined Korea Tourism Organization, she has dedicated herself to promoting South Korea to the world as a potential tourist destination. She is currently responsible for promoting the Tourism for All project at the Tourism Safety and Welfare Center at KTO. So thank you very much, Sujin, for being our speaker today. Over to you. Yes.
Thank you, Olivia, for the amazing introduction. And also thank you, Pata, for hosting this amazing webinar and inviting KTO for today's webinar. And personally, it's an honor to have an opportunity to talk about accessible tourism in South Korea. KTO stands for Korea Tourism Organization, and it was established in 1962. It's pretty old too, on a mission to vitalize the tourism industry in South Korea. And it is a state-run organization, and it is under the Ministry of Culture, Sports, and Tourism of the Republic of Korea. KTO carries out various projects such as attracting potential foreign tourists to Korea, supporting startup companies in the tourism sector, and so on. But today, I'd like to introduce what KTO does in relation to accessible tourism for a more inclusive world. So my presentation includes these 4 subjects: why accessible tourism is getting important in Korea, and what KTO does in response, and some best cases of accessible tourist destinations in South Korea, and finally some international recognition. Accessible tourism is getting important in Korea as well, partly because the demand on accessible tourism is increasing. People with disabilities and older adults are categorized as the main target of accessible tourism. And in South Korea, they account for almost 30% of the nation's population. And as many people know, South Korea is becoming an aging society at a very fast rate, so the demand on accessible tourism is expected to rise. The South Korean government also acknowledges the significance of accessible tourism, so equal opportunity in tourism is one of the major government projects this year. Moreover, Act on Prohibition of Discrimination based on disabilities and age have been enacted and amended since 1997. In this respect, KTO has launched Tourism for All project, and it roughly consists of these 3 pillars. The first one is building barrier-free tourist attractions. As of June 2023, 132 tourist destinations in South Korea have been designated as accessible tourist destinations by KTO. Once they are designated, the government budget is allocated to build accessible facilities such as parking lots and bathroom for people with disabilities. And also professional consulting services provided to local government or provincial governments throughout the whole process of building barrier-free facilities. And this whole process takes approximately 1.5 years. And the second one is providing accessible tourism information. We KTO support making the tourism environment accessible, not only physically, but also intangibly. That means we try to make tourism information available and accessible to all potential tourists, regardless of disabilities and age. So some useful information such as customized tour routes for wheelchair users or families with babies or toddlers is uploaded on KTO's website and social media like YouTube and Instagram. And we also hold various online and offline events to raise awareness on the importance of accessibility in tourism. And then I'd like to introduce some best cases of accessible tourist destinations that have been built by Korea in partnership and collaboration with the Ministry of Tourism and local governments. The first one is the accessible camping trailer in Gangneung. It has a, as you can see in the picture right here, it has a wheelchair ramp to the entrance of the trailer. And there are also no bumps or uneven ground inside the trailer. So whether they have a mobility disability or not, anyone can move freely around and inside the trailer without any trouble. And last year, about 52% of the users were people with disabilities, which shows KTO's Tourism for All project is worthwhile. And the second case I'd like to highlight is the accessible road in Mountain Pisul in Daegu. So some might think climbing up the mountain and enjoy the view from the top is not easy for people with mobility disabilities. But we have built an accessible road to the top of the mountain so that people with mobility disabilities or with families with a baby stroller can reach the top of the mountain. And there is an accessible deck as well so that all visitors can enjoy the views. Moreover, wheelchair van service is available as well. So if wheelchair users want to take a van to the top of the mountain, they can freely use the service once reservation is made in advance. Last but not least, I'd like to highlight the international recognition that our work has received. In 2021, the UNWTO released a report on accessible tourism under the title of Accessibility and Inclusive Tourism Development. And KTO's work was introduced as one of the best 11 cases of accessible tourism projects. And last year, KTO won the Gold Award within the Tourism for All division from PATA, and probably that's why KTO was invited for today's webinar. South Korea has not historically been the most accessible tourist destination for people with disabilities or elderly people, but we, KTO, is working to remedy that. And we are also very proud of the progress that has been made so far. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sujin, for that presentation. I think I really, really love the best practices case studies that you shared, and also congratulations on the international recognition. Yes, very happy that you are PATA Gold Award winner 2022. But of course, the main reason why we asked you to be part of this webinar is because you have done good work, and we want to talk about that good work today. So thank you so much, Sujin. Sujin, stay with us because now we are going to jump into the panel discussion. So I want to welcome back on stage, our virtual stage, LoAnn and Salvatore, to turn on your cameras, unmute yourselves and everything And really, let's get started. Sorry, just doing a time check. Okay, we're right on time. So I want to dive into my first question, which we talked about a little bit just now during the rehearsal. And that is basically, we've heard so much from each individual speaker about what's being done right now, what are the good examples of initiatives for LGBTQ plus tourism, for women empowerment, and for accessibility. But let's talk a little bit more about the problem. What are the current gaps right now that we can identify in the industry? And once we've identified these gaps, how are we going to move forward? And how can we tackle these problems that we see right now that exist? So maybe we could go in a circle because everyone has a different point of view and different perspective and different pillar of expertise. Let's start with LoAnn, and then we'll go to Salvatore, and we'll end off with Sujin.
Thanks, Alethea. I was just talking about this with some colleagues last night, and I think we need to take a step back and look at the hospitality industry as a whole, because, by its very nature, tourism is about being welcoming to everyone, but yet we still see so many gaps in employment. And I think there are real opportunities to change the narrative by incorporating more diverse and inclusive hiring practices and helping to elevate marginalized voices in across the board to higher level offices in businesses and organizations. I mean, there are still not that many queer people who are out at the C-suite level in tourism.
Which is very lovely segue to Salvatore. Salvatore, do you have an answer for that?
But the answer, let's see if I have an answer. What I want to say is that, I mean, it's quite interesting. I mean, travel industry, in theory, should be the most diverse industry compared to any sector, because we are talking about an industry which is bringing together people around the world that are male, female, or different ethnicity, gender. So you should have these represented inside the organization, but actually it's not. I mean, often I end up in conferences, events where, generally speaking, everybody is saying that the travel industry is a female industry. And I mean, I may agree on some extent, meaning that if you look at the bottom part of the pyramid, meaning, for instance, sales staff in retail stores, where most probably this is true. But as you were mentioning, the female representation at executive level, at C-level, is not there at all. Today, if you count in the travel industry, considering airlines, retailers, consumer brands, tour operators, and so on and so forth, the female representation is about 20–25%, which somebody saying it's already a good result, I would say is not at all, because there is no reason to say that 20% of representation is a good result. So definitely gender representation is not there. Second point, I mean, gender pay gap is still a hot topic today. There is still a big gap. Most probably is driven from the fact that females are taking over roles which are not yet as senior as male. And this is one reason. But even in the same bracket, even if you look at the same type of roles, you still have differentiation about the compensation between genders. And on genders, I would add also another dimension that most probably very soon is going to become evident, which is the different compensation about ethnicity. This is something that is going to come on the table, I expect, very soon, and this is going to amplify even more the problem of the equal compensation. I would mention one more point that it's really hot for me, and I do believe that the travel industry should address it differently. I mean, if you look at the travel sector today, let's say images, messages, content are still around a stereotype. So there is a stereotype of travel that, in my view, is not embracing also non-dominant groups. So my point is, how can the travel industry deliver messages to customers, to the travelers, no? Meeting their expectation, considering that there are different types of experiences they want to have. And I'm very happy, that I just saw what Korea is doing, because it's very interesting, and I definitely admire what they have been able to put in place. So those are, in my view, the current gaps. Now you were asking, do you have an answer? The answer is complex, but I would say that to support a better representation of let's call it non-dominant groups, if they are, if it is a matter of gender, of ethnicity, or whatever, doesn't matter. I think there are at least 2 layers that should be considered. One is on entrepreneurship, to support those groups to get access to financial and also to knowledge, to start up their business and to grow it. Then there is the dimension of the employment, where most probably the support should go on the hiring, and this is something that we do as an executive search. Also on the rehiring, many of those categories, if we think about female, they have a break during their career, so they need to be supported on rejoining organization, and also on their career development. And there are some initiatives such as mentoring, networking, or coaching that are in place in different organizations. But for me, there is a third dimension that should be really leveraged, and this goes towards the, let's call it the new business trends. Nowadays, in the business environment, everybody talks about green economy and digital disruption. I do believe that this should be an opportunity to rebalance the current situation, allowing non-dominant groups to be there and to take somehow advantage of this new scenario, because this disruption is going to set the stage for the coming years in the labor market.
Thank you so much. Of course, it's a super complex issue. We don't need all the answers in this conversation. I think this conversation serves to spark conversations more and more and more after the webinar. So thank you. But we don't need complete answers, ladies and gentlemen, and we don't need complete answers, and we don't expect complete answers as well, because it is a very complex and diverse topic in and of itself. So Sujin, I wanted to direct the conversation to you to talk about the gaps that you can identify right now in the industry, also with respect to what you presented on in terms of accessibility. Tell us a little bit about the gaps that you see right now.
Okay, I think I can talk about it from the perspective of the government agency. I think it is somewhat hard for us to encourage the private sector to voluntarily participate in this project. For example, every time we try to collect data on accessible tourism, we go out and visit hotels or restaurants and check whether they have accessible road or like wheelchair chargers or not. The owners of the hotels and restaurants are, of course, not happy about it. And they are not really, they are not willing to give those information to us, because personally, I think they don't see the point of this whole process. I think they think accessibility in tourism is not helpful for their business. So getting them know that accessibility in the tourism will be profitable at the end of the day is important. And if I allowed to talk about the example that I showed before, for example, we've built the wheelchair road to the top of the mountain. And we also provide the wheelchair van service. But if the workers who work there do not know about the fact that they provide those services, the effort we have made goes well. So educating the workers at the tourist destination is also important.
Thank you so much. I think that's so important. Training of your workers, making sure that they all know and they're all on board with the same idea in order for that idea to have practicality in this real world. I want to circle back to that idea about the private sector not being very on board or not being happy to collaborate or even give that data to organizations that are working towards these goals. And I wanted to tap on LoAnn and Salvatore, your experiences. What are your experiences in convincing the private sector to come on board with the missions of LGBTQ plus tourism or women empowerment tourism? Are they already 100% on board, or is there some coaxing and some conversation that needs to happen before they become 100% on board? How is that process like for both of you?
Well, I think a lot of times it's just a lack of awareness. You know, sometimes businesses just haven't really given it that much thought. And so it's just about having those conversations and helping them to understand that there are indeed a lot of marginalized people that need to be taken into consideration. But what I do really agree about as far as another gap is the need for more research and data. And it's the same for the LGBTQ plus tourism market, because it's very hard to track global data when you're talking about a community that in many countries is still invisible. And so getting more destinations on board with actually looking at the community and its importance would be very helpful then in expanding the conversations and narrative.
So data, important, especially when the community is invisible, and making sure that data is collected in a safe space. Salvatore?
Yeah, actually, I definitely agree on the data. I like to share with you what I recently read from a recent survey that I think it really fits with your question. I mean, I was reading this benchmarking survey on diversity and inclusion they did it globally, but also there was a deep dive in different regions from one of the top consulting firms, which fits exactly with my experience. I mean, two interesting findings. One is that almost 30% of the answer from this research were showing that companies nowadays, they put in place diversity, inclusion strategy with the objective or to be compliant with the legal requirement or to enhance their brand reputation. Which is, I mean, I think a missing opportunity for them to really leverage the meaning and the potential of diversity and inclusion strategy. And 30% is a big chunk. Then there is another 35-40%. There was another 35-40% of respondents that were declaring that their main goal was more into enhancing, attracting, and retaining talents, which is definitely good. But for me, the interesting part is that basically 2/3 of the respondents, they were not mentioning the impact on customers. I mean, so this means that they are not really taking diversity, inclusion, equity as a real business priority. So this is not only a people this not only should be in the people agenda, but in the business strategy of the company. So this is one dimension where I still see that there is not a proper positioning of the subject. And then the second point was related to data. 50% of those organizations were declaring that they were tracking gender diversity, which is good for the 50%, but still there are 50% of companies not even tracking the gender, which is crazy. Not only that, very, 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 very few organizations were tracking data regarding on compensation, promotion, again, customer feedback. And, this means for me that the diversity, inclusion, equity is still not perceived in the organization as important as boosting revenues or working on customer satisfaction. Otherwise, we would have had more data for sure.
Okay, so we've kind of been circling around this question about the bottom line, right? And at the end of the day, we acknowledge that tourism is a profit-driven industry, so especially for the private sector. So the bottom line does matter. What impact can diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives and narratives have on the economic development and maybe community empowerment here? Who wants to go first?
Well, I'll just jump in because everyone's being shy. So I made a comment to you, Alethea, in the practice session about this question. And I guess you're absolutely right. Tourism can make a huge difference. And when you consider that oftentimes LGBTQ plus people are some of the most marginalized, and if they have opportunities through tourism, there's a real opportunity for advancement and change. So it can have a great social impact. And more successful, thriving communities mean a greater economy and a healthier economy. So there is an economic benefit, and I would never deny that. I think my sort of sensitivity around this topic is that so much interest in LGBTQ tourism in the beginning was all about this idea of dual income, no kids, and we were worth all this money. And so therefore, everyone started going after the LGBTQ market because they thought, oh, I'm going to make all this money. And it wasn't a particularly genuine or authentic approach. It was really just about the bottom line. So I just want to make sure that every conversation about economics is on the side of how we can uplift communities rather than how can we just make money off of a segment.
I think from what I know, it used to be called the pink dollar economy, that you chase the pink dollars. But it really resonates with me that at the end of the day, when we talk about travel being a force for good, it's for the good of the communities. And I really like that perspective that you bring, thinking about travel, the bottom line, and the economy here in the LGBTQ sense. So going back to the question, what impact can DEI initiatives have on economic development for the private sector, on the bottom line for the private sector, and community empowerment? Maybe Sujin, you could share a little bit.
Yeah, sure. I agree with Ms. LoAnn because as technology is developing, more and more people with disabilities or the elderly people will go out and travel around the country or other countries. Like for example, in South Korea, like decades ago, there was stigma on people with disabilities or the elderly people. But nowadays, you can see so many celebrities or like YouTubers with disabilities or elderly YouTubers. So people are crazy about their content, about going around and traveling, enjoying the landscape without any difficulty. So just like the LGBTQ community, those group of people, like people with disabilities and the elderly people, are ready to go out and travel. But so that means they can contribute to the economy. So once they contribute to the economy, the private sector will know that these people are profitable to their business, and more businesses will grow and start. So equity in the tourism, accessibility and equity in the tourism industry will definitely benefit the economy as a whole.
Okay, so it's a little bit about giving more limelight to those marginalized voices, having those voices show their impact and contributions as well, right? In order to change the mindset of communities.
Mm-hmm.
Salvatore, do you have any inputs that you would like to add?
Yeah, I would like to share also my perspective here. You are talking about bottom line. For sure, diversity, inclusion is impacting the top line, meaning the revenues. If you don't start from the top line, you cannot see anything reflected in the bottom line. So this is clear because we are talking about communities that want to have a travel experience and are ready to spend money if they find an offer that is meeting their expectations. But here we are still talking about financial performances, which are important. But let's not forget that nowadays we have investors that are not looking only at financial performances. Of course, investors are looking at financial performances, but more and more they are taking in consideration new dimension, and the ESG framework is there for this reason. The environmental, social, and governance factors that are taken in consideration by investors to really understand if the financial performances of an organization or a company are sustainable over the time. And studies and research have shown that companies that are active on ESG have higher probability to be alive after 5-10 years compared to companies that are not active on there. And if you think that diversity inclusion strategies are basically feeding any factor of the ESG framework, environmental, social, or governance, you clearly have an answer why approaching diversity inclusion, it should be a strategic goal for any organization.
I love that. I love that. Can you tell us a little bit more about ESG and how that specifically makes a company's financial position more sustainable?
Yeah, for sure. I can make just few example. I mean, when we talk about environmental, we are talking about, for instance, reducing the carbon footprint in our society. We know through research and studies that diversity, the diverse group of people working in an organization, usually they promote or they bring more innovation, different solution due to the different perspective and different voices. So this is just an example. When we talk about social impact, I mean, diversity itself is a key parameter for enhancing the social aspect in the ESG framework. We talk about governance, in this case, equality or ethical leadership are all dimensions that are underpinning any diversity inclusion strategy. So you can clearly see how diversity inclusion initiative and strategies are feeding the ESG framework and therefore are also taken in consideration by investors when they assess companies and organizations.
Love it. Love it. Thank you so much. Okay, so I want to pivot the conversation a little bit right now. So we've been talking about the gaps in the industry and the private sector and how do we convince people to come on board with our missions and everything. Let's talk a little bit about in the same mindset where we recognize that there are some regions or some countries where accessibility, where women's rights and LGBTQ plus rights may face limitations or social stigma. So staying in that same mindset, what strategies or what best practices can be implemented to ensure the creation of a more inclusive world, right? So maybe let's talk about the strategies and the best practices that you would recommend, right? Based on your experiences and based on your organization's work thus far to other organizations who are in the same space as well. Maybe we could start with Sujin from the perspective of a government organization. What if I have another destination that's asking questions about accessibility, what's the first step that you should take and what's the end goal that they should be looking forward to?
I don't think it is a strategy, but the first thing we focus is that we try to focus on, when we try to market the accessible towards the destination, we try to show that these tourist destinations are for all people, regardless of disabilities and age. We do not market this attraction is for the disabled or the elderly, but it is the place where anyone can enjoy. So partly because we don't want to like stigmatize the tourist attraction like as it is only for certain groups of people.
Okay, so something that you very, very clearly kept in mind during your marketing campaigns and your marketing strategies. Does that translate into more diverse imagery in your marketing?
Yeah, for example, when we take like advertising pictures or videos, we always, the videos and pictures always star people with and without disabilities and people who are single or parent, like families with babies and toddlers. Like, so everyone is included in one frame.
Okay, I love that you did highlight single as a group of travelers as well. That was quite funny. So yes, LoAnn, let's go to you now for the idea of in regions and countries where LGBTQ rights are still limited, right? What strategies can be implemented by different stakeholders, right? Pick a stakeholder that you want to feature in your reply. What strategies can that stakeholder do to create a more inclusive world?
Well, we work with members all over the world because we're working with individual businesses. So many of our members are located in countries that have quite challenging laws. And I've had some incredible experiences traveling in those countries with those members, because what they really did was they were very intentional about how they set up their business. And this is where allies become so important. You know, we need our allies. Often when we're existing in the shadows, they're the people who are more free to go speak on our behalf that can actually make a difference. But my experience with tour operators has been, before taking LGBTQ tours out into a country that has challenging laws, they reached out to every supplier, they met with every supplier, and they had conversations with them in advance about LGBTQ plus travelers, that they would be bringing them to assess their comfort level in advance. And some of the businesses came back and said, you know what, that's not for us. And some of them didn't reply at all. And some of them came back and said, oh, our hotel front desk manager is a gay man and we would love to have you. And through those conversations, they found so much more community out there. And I think that's a really incredible place to start, because we have to remember that the laws of a country are not indicative of every single person in that country.
Yeah, I think it goes back to your original point where like the community doesn't exist in a vacuum as well.
Exactly.
Okay, Salvatore, how about you? What
Yeah,
okay,
this is
you know the question. You know the question. Go.
Yeah. It's a very important aspect, because obviously there are differences among geographies or even among companies that are not at the same level of maturity when we talk about diversity. I mean, I think that a potential strategy to support organizations or companies that are in countries where you face those type of challenges. I do believe that all public agencies or industrial associations should support their members, which in this case are organizational companies, to be exposed also to international trends. To see what happens beyond their country. This is to just trigger a different mindset. So this is one aspect. The same organization can also support those companies providing business cases, providing examples on how consumer trends are evolving and what the consumers are expecting, because I do believe that then you start putting in place a process that is gonna evolve, is gonna bring you somewhere.
Yeah. So basically being able to broaden your mind, which is what travel is all about, right? And like take a look at international trends. Don't just be so insular with the echo chamber that already surrounds you, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you so much, guys. So we are coming to the end of our panel discussion. How did you think you guys did? I really enjoyed this session. I really enjoyed that we could bounce off each other. The conversation really flowed. Does anyone have any parting words for the industry that you would like to share? What is the biggest takeaway that you want the audience to take away?
Education matters. Go out and do your homework and get more information. And IGLTA is here for you to provide resources on LGBTQ plus travel whenever you're ready. We welcome you with open arms.
And everyone does or will do benefit from accessible tourism.
Oh, I want to frame this moment. Salvatore, please.
Yeah, for me, it's a matter of, consolidating diversity, inclusion strategies in the organization. For me, it's a clear way to attract and retain staff as well as customers. And, a poor reputation on diversity inclusion might really have a negative impact on your organizations.
100%. So I really feel that, just my 2 cents worth, I really feel that as well, because we've been having so many conversations about human capital development. We've been having so many conversations about how to retain talent with our members that are spread out across the globe, across different verticals in the industry. And I do think having your organization aligned to the ideals of DEI is one way that you can definitely attract young talent to stay with you, to be loyal to you, to work for you in the ways that you want them to, in motivated ways. So, well, that's my takeaway from this session as well, just to add. But once again, we have run out of time, but I want to say such a big thank you to LoAnn, Sujin, and Salvatore for spending this morning/afternoon/evening with us. Because we are all spread out across the globe. And just thank you so much for contributing your time and attention to this conversation that we're having today in this webinar. So yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And everyone listening.
Bye.
So now the panel discussion is over. I do have a couple of wrap-up notes that I want to share with the audience. So one of the few things that PADA is doing, and Sujin did mention it before, is the PADA Gold Awards. And the PADA Gold Awards has been, next slide, please. Yeah, has been around since 1984. I want to say a huge thank you to our sponsors, the Macau Government Tourism Office. Thank you so much for your support of the PADA Gold Awards. The award is an industry award to celebrate excellence in the region, and it recognizes exceptional achievement in a variety of endeavors, right? And it acknowledges and rewards the very, very best of what Pacific Asia's travel industry has to offer in the realms of marketing and also in the realms of sustainability and social responsibility. So the award is accepting submissions until the deadline of 30th June, which is in 2 weeks' time. So please do consider submitting your initiatives for this award. And you can scan the QR code right there, or you can email the email that's on the screen right now if you have more questions. Next up, we also want to say, very close to my heart, human capital development, is this initiative called the PADA Face of the Future. This award seeks to identify and reward a rising star in the industry. This person should have exhibited initiative and leadership in the advancement of tourism, as well as demonstrating commitment to the sustainable development of the APAC travel industry in line with PADA's missions. So this rising star is the face of the future, and you are a thought leader in the industry. Please do consider submissions. They have already begun, and the deadline is July 15th. The winner announcement for both PADA Gold Awards and the Face of the Future will be happening in early September, and then the award is presented at the PADA Travel Mart. So next up, please. Just wanted to share with you the in-person events that are happening. So the PADA Destination Experience Forum and Mart is happening very soon. It's happening next week, June 21st to 23 in Kuching, Sarawak, Malaysia. I'm very excited about this event. It's all about destination marketing. How can we do this? How can we experience destinations in the most sustainable way possible? That's happening next week. Still not too late to join us if you really, really live your life on the edge and you want to experience things and you want to do things last minute. Not too late. So you can join us for PDEFM. The next event is PADA Travel Mart, happening on October 4th to 6th. So I believe at the same time as LoAnn's event. This PADA Travel Mart is going to happen in New Delhi, India, and it's a great opportunity for mainstream travel products for tour operators, tour agencies, OTAs, hospitality, destinations who want to do business at scale for global buyers and with the India outbound market. This is the event to be at. So please consider being a seller with an exhibition booth to do B2B trade meetings at PADA Travel Mart, or consider joining us as a buyer or a conference delegate. The PADA Youth Symposium will also be happening at the PADA Travel Mart in October. So do I have another slide? No, okay, that's it. That's it from me. Thank you so much, partners, members, chapters, sponsors, and everybody who attended today. Thank you so much to our speakers for making this webinar a huge success. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. We can't do anything without you. And it is really our mission here at PADA to serve our members and the community at large, and making sure that we fulfill this idea of travel as a force for good. So that was what everything today was about. I am Alethea. If you have any questions, you can email me. Those are my emails. And thank you. That's it for today. It's been very, very, very lovely. Yes, we will send you the slides after this. And that's it. I hope to see you at a PADA event soon or an industry event soon. Goodbye. Have a lovely day, everybody.